welcome to Framing Pictures here at Scarecrow Video. And we are assembled, we film critics, to talk about the, well, whatever we want to talk about. And,
movies. I want to talk about movies.
Easy, people. It's we'll speak of movies and small screen phenomena.
And maybe say goodbye to some movie theaters.
Oh, we could do that too, yeah. My name is Robert Horton.
Reid.
I'm Kathleen Murphy.
Richard Jameson.
Well, you know, there are a number of things that we are going to get to that are somewhat heavy duty, but there's a film out now that is playing at a zillion theaters and that has found an appreciative audience. And that film is Wonder Woman.
Ah.
And we wondered whether we might. Why did you leap to the fray? You're not really Wonder Woman, are you? You're not. I wasn't summoning you to the.
At a candy.
Wonder Woman. Addition to the gallery of superhero movies that has certainly gotten better reviews than most of the recent superhero films, I guess. And I ask you, is this film, Kathleen Murphy, is this film deserve these nice reviews?
I would love to be Wonder Woman.
Well,
really,
for the next
truly.
5 minutes, you will be.
I say that with some truth because this is a point of gender privilege. When I was growing up, I loved action stories, adventure stories, and when I read about Robin Hood, I wanted to be Robin Hood, not Maid Marian. And it was only after many, many years that I began to notice that I was identifying with male heroes. I mean, I never even thought about it. And it's funny, the moment when I realized that was Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid, because Sam Peckinpah's Western. Because after I saw it, I went to a party that was full of very intellectual women, and I remember saying, this movie has just blown me away, and it's about these men sort of walking around the West waiting to die, waiting to find the place where they should die, and it's a very elegiac and beautiful film, and it moved me very much. And I realized that the women that I was talking to were not really twigging to what I was saying. And I realized then, at that moment, that perhaps I had been identifying with the wrong gender most of my life. I didn't regret this, it was just an epiphany. But watching Wonder Woman, in which women are strong, the island of Amazons from which Diana Prince or Wonder Woman comes, it's full of these strong women, and they aren't just strong in character, they're strong in body. Robin Wright and Connie Nielsen are just splendid, beautiful creatures in repose and in battle. And watching Gal Gadot as Wonder Woman in the battles that she fights, one of which is she just decides to walk across no man's land in World War I between trenches, British and German trenches, and she is just beautiful to watch. And it takes your breath away because physically she is up to it, and she is also being extraordinarily beautiful while she's doing it. Now I have read by several testimony by several women that watching her in action actually made them weep. And I don't usually fall into tears in superhero movies and so on, but she did bring tears to my eyes because I have never seen a woman do that before. I have never totally identified with a strong, a powerful woman who is not, you know, as soon as she gets off the superhero stage, immediately turning into goop over some fellow who isn't worthy of her or what have you. she's just splendid as a person. And I was telling Robert when I was talking to him about this film, in a climate that right now seems to me to be designed to create despair, and I'm talking about a political climate, a climate of failed character on almost every front, a poisonous climate, to watch someone, this actress, portray a superhero with this generosity of spirit, innocence that is not somehow undermined by irony or quotation marks or what have you, but is full-hearted, full-throated, and genuinely, witty and engaging, was quite an experience. The feeling of it, the taste of it has not gone away. It has sustained me through Comey hearings and various other press conferences and so on. And I'm not saying that lightly. I'm really not. What I would say about the film, it's not a great film. It's kind of regular level action film. But the actress and the character of Wonder Woman and the beginning on that island of Amazons, those are splendid.
Yeah, there's I couldn't tell you who this was because it wasn't somebody I followed, but people were pointing out, some of their favorite just one-liner tweets about the movie. And I thought the best one by far was some person I had no idea. It's like, no wonder guys are usually such jerks, because one viewing of Wonder Woman and I'm ready to kick the world's ass. And, it's like, if this has been your daily diet for, 40 years, then you get a little bit aggressive, I think. But no, it is the opening in Themyscira, which is, by the way, which is it's like they just decided to do the most beautiful, idyllic Mediterranean coast that they could possibly find, and it's all beautiful. But the film does some clever things in terms of Wonder Woman lore of comics. I don't mean literally like stories from the comics. I just mean that the film is the comics have been more explicit about the fact that the Amazonian society on Themyscira is not only non-patriarchal but is full of lesbianism. They don't do that in the movie, but they also
she makes her point about that.
Exactly, I was going to say it's made quite clear. It's like, yeah, this is what happens. So
no, but I mean, Wonder Woman makes that clear.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, no, I knew exactly the bit. Yeah, but and then one thing I actually was really pleased by is, as you say, when you're with all these Amazonian warriors in the beginning, it's not just like a parade of, they're all beautiful women dressed in skirts and all the rest of it, but they're all beautiful because they're fighting each other all the time in training and battles and all the rest of it. And it has that beauty. It's not the beauty of somebody in repose. It's the beauty of Jet Li sizing up an attacker. It's the beauty of Keanu Reeves and John Wick making his moves. There's one woman who the actress, I believe, is a professional athlete. I don't know her name. I apologize, but she's there because during the training she just stands impervious as people smack these sticks across her broad back, and she doesn't even flinch, and then takes them out. And it's just like it becomes its own beauty.
It's partially because these are women in kinesis, and powerfully so. They move in space in a way that is not like the way women generally occupy space.
Yeah.
And there is something so exhilarating about it. And it's not just superpowers. I don't mean that. It's a grace and power that you don't, well, I'm repeating myself, that you don't see females manifest very often or at all. Robert?
I can't really add anything to that because no, I enjoyed the film, and it's been it's been very cool to read, women who write about film talking about this film, and to listen to what you just said.
And Patty Jenkins, too. I like the way she was turning some conventions on their heads.
Yeah.
Like the bath scene.
Yes,
with Chris
absolutely.
Pine.
There's the half-naked babe, and it's the guy
It's
this
Pine.
time.
And it's Wonder Woman who is commenting on his attributes,
Yeah.
not the other way around.
And it's not just a single joke, because he gets to wittily comment on this scene as well, and it all just is very
No, he's not a
cleverly done.
dupe.
Yeah.
So you don't have to diminish the male in order to have this splendid woman,
Yeah.
which was another gift the film gave us.
And there's also, I don't know, I guess it'd be a Jenkins thing. It's funny because actually the in terms of tearing up, I confess I didn't have the emotional tearing up because of the battles. I did actually tear up at one point, and it was actually because there's this beautiful Hoxian moment out of nowhere where Wonder Woman, she gets teamed up with these companions, one of whom, Ewan Bremner, has obviously got some sort of PTSD or shell shock.
Yeah.
And when at one point he realizes he can't fight anymore, and he's not thinking of going on. And she's like, "Oh, but you got to come with us, because not to get the whole thing, but who else is going to sing for us?" And it is.
You're right.
I did love that little moment.
You're right. And I like the fact that she tried to create a little tribe of misfits and outsiders. It was a little heavy-handed, of course, but they were nice people. I liked looking at them. I liked listening to them. It didn't make me feel as though I was seeing a parade of diversity, a lesson in diversity. I just liked those people.
The Indian was pushing it.
Well, I hope if they do a sequel that it will be as splendid as this one. That would be very good.
Sequels, yes.
She is apparently signed on.
I would hope so.
Yeah.
They would be crazy if they did not.
They had not,
have her.
actually.
Yeah.
And we ought to say
You talking
something.
about Patty Jenkins?
Yeah.
Both.
They hadn't actually
Oh.
signed her on. I don't know if she just announced that they did or not.
I had read that she was signing on.
That's what I'm saying. It is traditional in these type of films to sign on, to jump ahead to David Lynch. David Lynch, coming off of Elephant Man, signed on to make 2 Dune movies. We all know how that turned out. Patty Jenkins was signed on for 1 film. Then it turned out to be a huge hit, so hopefully she was able to negotiate that up a bit. But they actually hadn't signed her on for the sequel.
It's interesting that two of maybe the 3 most interesting superheroes in recent times have been Jessica Jones and Wonder Woman, and of course Deadpool.
Of course.
Maybe we're going to continue getting interesting ones, and they won't just stand around and throw rocks at each other and demolish cities, which is getting very old.
They're scheduled through 2022 or something, so they'll get older, I guess. Well, speaking of duration, we have David Lynch returning to a sequel after 25 plus years in the world of Twin Peaks, and has apparently been given a free hand by Showtime, who decided it was a good idea to bankroll the longest experimental film and surely the most expensive ever made in America, with Twin Peaks: The Return. And I think everybody here has watched, most of us have watched the first 5 episodes. I think we have one outlier, but she can identify herself. I'm not going to do it. They're doling out the episodes in pieces, and you can either watch them on Showtime or pay for them if you want to get ahead a little bit. But here we are, after the first Twin Peaks series ended with a mystery person saying, "We'll see you in 25 years." Was that the invitation to Agent Dale Cooper?
Well, it was more convoluted because it was actually
Convoluted in Twin Peaks? Really? We've got 4 hours. Go ahead.
If you remember your Twin Peaks trivia, there was actually a European theatrical release of the pilot that tacked on an ending, which wasn't the actual solution. It had nothing to do with the series, but they just had to come up with a solution. It was Bob, but he just turns out to be a drifter, and so there was no other stuff going on. But then Lynch had already shot the first of the, Black Lodge, Red Room dream sequences with the man from another place and Laura Palmer talking everything. So he appended it to this European cut after the solution of the Mercery with 25 years later. And then suddenly you're watching if you thought it was weird in the TV show, in the European cut, it just literally says 25 years later, and then it's that scene.
Whoa.
Which then led to them incorporating that back in later in terms of 25 years later. Laura Palmer says that to him. And so, apparently what happened was as the deadline was approaching, I don't know who went to whom, but Mark Frost, who was the co-writer and co-creator, went to Lynch, or Lynch went to Frost, and they said, think we can work this out? Let's see if we can, and that's how we got it.
I have no reason to doubt that Lynch planned this all along, thought of it 40 years ago, and just waited. So here it is. Let's talk about the first 5 episodes, I guess. I don't know to what degree we have to keep spoilers out of it. It's not comprehensible in ordinary terms, so maybe that's not a thing.
Yeah,
Does it have spoilers? No, I'm serious.
I would argue yes.
Some of the casting, perhaps.
Exactly.
No, this was a genuine question.
Yeah.
Yeah, like who's playing who, that kind of thing.
Okay.
and how many whom's a single actor playing.
Yeah.
Thinking of Kyle MacLachlan. Still definitely given stellar billing among an ever-growing army of amazing cameos, and well, maybe they're going to be more than cameos.
Yeah, exactly.
Although there are people we saw in the first episode getting into some very interesting situations who have yet to reappear in the ensuing 4 segments, but I'm pulling for you, Matthew Lillard. I really want to know what was going on with you.
Yeah.
I'm finding it more engrossing. Doesn't seem quite the right word, but I'm definitely into it more, episode by episode, as I watched. I saw the first 2, which were shown as a unit on Showtime itself, and there was a lot of stuff that was grabby, provocative. What's this going to lead to? What is it going to hook up with? And there was some stuff that just was so self-containedly flat somehow that I said, why bother with this? Why are we looking at this? But I'm giving everything the benefit of the doubt at this point, because you don't know what's going to bloom, possibly, from what has been planted, what has been casually cast off to the side and allowed to be forgotten, except, here it comes back again. We'll see. Only 5 episodes. What is it going to be, 18?
18, I believe.
Yeah.
18 hours.
Yeah, especially it's like, and blooming in not just conceptual or thematic ways. There's actually, our first return, because we start off with this guy we've never seen before who's got nothing to do with the series to that point, and he's sort of a self-contained little thing in the first episode. And our first sort of return to Twin Peaks, if you remember the series, is actually like this very strange shot of Dr. Jacoby, who is the psychiatrist with the lenses and stuff. And there's this sort of very strange scene where he's alone in the woods and he gets this package and he starts doing things. And that's just sort of layered in for a few episodes. And I will avoid spoilers, because basically in the 4th or 5th episode you find out what that all is about, and it's a joke. And it's hilarious, actually.
And a sustained joke.
Yeah, exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. So some of these things are blossoming into thematic or metaphysical concerns, and some of them are just, 2 guys going back to revisit a thing they had fun doing 25 years ago and continuing to do so. I personally find it actually really remarkable as you say, it's not just the longest form and the most expensive experimental film made, but there's always been this thing about Lynch which is practically unique. Maybe somebody can come up with another example where there have always been filmmakers who have stumbled into huge success at some point without compromising themselves, like an Antonioni with Blow Up or something like that. Lynch is this curious thing where on paper and watching his films, he should be the nichest of niche filmmakers. Yet he's always had this yearning for, not yearning in the sense of a need to sustain himself, but he thinks in populist terms. He wants to do long-form television series. He wants to, and he'll do his 3-hour experimental shot-on-video film if that's all he can get the money for.
He used to be on The Tonight Show going back to probably the early 90s, if not before that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
As what?
As a very odd artiste type who was good for showing up and saying funny things that sometimes sounded wise and sometimes sounded odd. And
I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah.
his celebrity is interesting.
Yeah, he's always had this celebrity, and there's something about Twin Peaks, the original series, back in the 90s. This was pre-internet, of course, so some of this has been siphoned away. But the thing that was sort of weirdest about the show, as weird as it got, was that when you were in the supermarket, Soap Opera Digest was covering this thing every week. It was actually a phenomenon beyond just a bunch of intellectual experimental film nerds. This was a mass thing, and the new series has that same quality where, even though there are segments in this thing that I will never parse and know what was going on in that floating room in space.
What about that tree? That tree thing?
The evolution of the arm?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
That was, but I don't have any explanation for it. Do you?
Well, there's a pragmatic one in terms of what's going on in the show. No, in terms of pragmatically, if you don't know, not to get it down, the actor that it's replacing, and I'll just leave it that way so nobody gets spoiled if they haven't seen it.
Yeah.
The actor that it's replacing basically went insane and on tirades against David Lynch. Like really nasty tirades against it. This is years before, so
I didn't know that.
That relationship was severed.
Oh, okay.
So something had to be done because you needed that character in Twin Peaks.
Okay.
Although that tree, speaking of the tree, though, I don't know if you've gotten to this yet because I don't know how far you are, but one of the funniest and craziest things Lynch has done, and again, this goes to the experimental and the weird populist sense, is that this being that looks like some sort of branchless twig with a potato head, and so that thing has an evil doppelganger. And the second you see it, it's exactly what the evil doppelganger of that thing would look like.
Alrighty then.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you one thing I really like in horror movie terms. I love the making people talk backwards or whatever he's doing, because it's really scary to
it
me.
is. It's very
And it reminds me of Kiyoshi Kurosawa movies, things that shouldn't speak. That really scares me a lot. And also the kind of rustling sound, like the woman in the room, the Art Deco kind of bar place, and then the box in the universe. It reminded me, I told Richard this, it reminded me of the sound that lady, you remember her name in the other Kurosawas.
Don't tell me I'll remember her name. It starts with an H, but she's the woman.
Yes,
in
she's
Ram.
very evil, and
Yeah.
she moves towards the camera, and her robes make this horrible silk
yes,
sound.
yes.
Somebody wrote a great review of that
Yes.
film, and they said it was like a shroud that purrs.
Did you write that?
That's right, it was.
I can be a straight woman once in a while. Anyway, that sound he's using, and that I also find terrifying.
Oh yeah, no. There's something about Lynch that has always triggered his understanding of the limits of the rational make his dream sequences so pervasive and powerful. There's actually, to veer into autobiography, which I've mentioned this to Robert in the past, there are, to this day and age, about 8 or 10 images from films that if I'm lying in bed and they occur to me, I get the chills and have to get under the covers. Now, all of these were things I saw when I was 6 or 7 years old, and they just sort of imprinted upon me. And the ending to the original Fly. If I think of that, I just freak out. There's other things from like Blood Circus and other type of movies. The only one that I saw as an adult is actually a scene from the original Twin Peaks series, which is it's also backwards if you ever watch it again, which is the notorious scene of Bob climbing over the couch.
Oh, yes.
To get to them.
Which is also Kurosawa.
Yeah.
Kyosho.
Yes, Kyosho. And there's just it's a guy climbing over a couch.
But still.
A friend and I used to talk about how one of the things that make Lynch's, again with that populist sense, there's this sort of weird overlap with Lynch and Stephen King in the way that their evil is really banal. I don't mean banal in the sense of daily, like, it's just a guy who lives down the street. I mean, like, literary horror or literary, surrealism will come up with a demonic creature that's possessing you, and they will talk about how at midnight I'll possess your corpse. They will do these kind of things. The signature phrase that has been going through Twin Peaks for all these years for these demonic spirits is, "Let's rock." And that's somehow creepier, because you're dealing basically with this superpowered, immortal, can cross over dimensions jerk at a bar.
Yeah.
And speaking of jerks at a bar, by the way.
Don't point at me when you say that.
No.
Although, I apologize.
But no, because you haven't seen it yet. But there's a character in this most recent one, the 5th episode, as we say this. Lynch unveiled another one of his nightmare figures at a bar. Just this guy who's smoking under a non-smoking sign. Ha 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 ha. And then, as always should never happen in Lynch films, basically a girl tries to flirt with him. And it goes into a very horrifying and very, again, just like cheap fashion, where his response is terrifying and scary and nasty and not at all sophisticated or elegant or gothic, just awful.
Yeah, there's a real grossness in Lynch, a real down and dirty grossness, and it's very uncomfortable.
Yep.
All of this is true, and at the same time, one of the things I've been struck by watching these first 5 episodes is how regularly hilarious they are. I have been laughing a lot. There are scenes of intense violence and some disturbing things going on, but even in the scenes that aren't clearly meant to be funny scenes, there's often something just wildly funny, almost getting out or not quite getting out. And I'm never quite sure how he does that, but it has something to do with the timing of the long pauses that go on, and everything changes because of that drawn out delivery. I don't understand why more directors or whatever don't understand that, because everything tends to move so quickly.
But like that box in the universe, you should describe the scene that takes us to the box in the universe first, because it's exquisite, the lighting and the place.
Well, I was just going to say that after she had stopped watching, I was.
My cover is blown.
I was on my mission alone from that point on, and I watched the 3rd hour, and I just, through the first 15 or so minutes of which I just sat with my jaw getting further and further down. Not because it was mystifying, it certainly is, and I have absolutely no idea what the explanation for any of it is, but it was one of the most sheerly beautiful 15 minutes of film I have seen in a long, long, long time. And I finally said to her, I said, you have to watch the beginning of this. It's not connected to any narrative that I can tell so you're not going to be dragged down by that. You don't have to worry about that. Just look at it, because it's like an undiscovered Jean Epstein surrealist short from 1928 or something, but done in spectacular color, and it's breathtaking, it's mesmerizing, it's astonishing, whatever adjective you want to lay on it fits. But it's incredibly beautiful.
But say what it is.
And the visual textures, I mean, that room that is so dark that you almost can't see what's going on, except that somehow the walls are glowing. This really deep amber gold.
But that kind of Art Deco effect of sconces that cast light and make walls look like they're glowing, and then this kind of round, there's a name for this, bank, I can't think of it. It's a
Behind the couch, you mean?
yeah, kind of a low wall that encloses this place where this woman is sitting, and she seems to be Asian, and she also seems to have no eyes,
Or they've been sewn shut.
or they've been
Let's be
sewn
fair.
shut. Okay, I'm sorry. I should have been more accurate.
No eyes.
Anyway, it is this woman, and of course Mr. McLaughlin, who somehow end up on the roof in a sort of box thing that also looks like a water tower, maybe, or some kind of stack in the middle of the universe. Now, of course, there is no logic, but that's the way it flows.
Especially since just to be fair, we saw McLaughlin get there by falling through space and landing on a proscenium in front of the ocean.
Yes, but he was spat out by a reflex camera.
Oh, yeah.
Now, to go back to my box in the universe,
Yes.
the thing about this scene, she's still talking backwards, which is creepy. I mean, it's just bone deep creepy. And they're on this box, and it looks like something that Steven Spielberg would have shot when he was about 12 and wanted to make a science fiction movie. I mean, it looks jerry-built, and the universe doesn't look real. And all these stars and these two people sort of teetering on this box and so on. And at the same time, it is deeply, deeply weird and terrifying, and a sense of human total isolation and lostness. Now, I don't know how you do that amateur night sci-fi thing and then also the other thing, because I was kind of knocked out by that.
Well, because I mean that's actually another one of Lynch's strengths has always been. You mentioned the humor that keeps welling up, and it does. There's a lot of humor in this, and I agree with you. But there's also, and as there's always been with Lynch, there's this enormous tenderness for creation and humanity that will just constantly just pop up. There's a scene you haven't seen yet, but you. Where again, I don't want to get too many spoilers, but for very convoluted reasons, again, Kyle MacLachlan is in possession of a child which was not really his, but is kind of his, and he's been placed into this family that has like an 8-year-old boy, and because of his experience of getting back to the real world, MacLachlan is actually going through this very kind of aggressive, sort of comatose state of just wandering through things. He can't put the world together yet. So he's repeating what people say and just moving along, and people have to move him along like a zombie and stuff. There's this scene where after all this sort of comedy about people getting frustrated with how he doesn't do what they tell him to, like, get in the car, and he just stands there because he doesn't know what that means. And Lynch looks over at his son. I mean, not Lynch. Well, Lynch McLaughlin. You know, if there was ever an alter ego in the Lynch universe.
I was going to say.
Looks over at his son in the backseat of the Range Rover that he doesn't realize he's supposed to get into, and just starts crying at just the frailty, I guess, of this child in a world that's as awful as it is. You know, there's always been the original Twin Peaks had this wonderful. The series had this wonderful moment that probably summed up Lynch's worldview as much as anything, which is that after, and this is 20-year-old spoilers, so I don't care. That after it was revealed that Bob was this inhabiting spirit that possessed the guy and blah blah blah, Michael Onkine as Sheriff Truman is in the woods and he's talking with Albert, with Farrar, the FBI agent. He's like, you're telling me like there's evil spirits in the woods and they possess bodies and they take over your soul and they make you do things? And Farrar, just dead serious, says, it's like that makes less sense to you than that a father would rape and kill his own daughter? And that's always been the message of this Twin Peaks universe, is that there are such horrible things in the world, and it's so tender and beautiful. At some point, you haven't seen this scene yet either, but I tell you right now, at some point there are right now dozens of people wanting to, writing books on Lynch that are racing to have the title "Fix Your Hearts or Die," which is a line from this new series.
Yeah, he has that ability to. I've always marveled at some of the lines of dialogue that will come out of a scene, sometimes seemingly isolated, and be so eerie and so. I mean, he was doing this in Eraserhead, you know, at the dinner with the weird chickens and stuff. But I was just thinking of one, not just the one that you just quoted, which is sort of amazing when it comes at you, but during the scene that we were just talking about, where there's that woman is standing by the couch, and she says something like, there's not very much dialogue, and she says something like, "We have to hurry because my mother is coming."
My mother, because there's that pounding at the...
And that just sent chills through me. It had no bearing with anything. There's no context for it, and yet I've heard girls say that to me, you know, in many years ago, and everybody probably has, and the primal excitement plus fear of hearing that line. It's like, how does David Lynch do this? Of just plucking, like this scene is only going to have 3 lines of dialogue or whatever it was. I don't know how he manages that.
I mean, it's not even just dialogue. There's a remarkable. I'm not going to see a better scene this year, I don't think, even in the rest of the series, which again you haven't gotten to yet, so you might find this hard to believe. But there is a close-up for about a minute of Amanda Seyfried. That is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And it's all about the sort of innocence of a young girl who knows that she's with a bad drug addict, and it's the appeal of rebellion, but it's also the danger and hauntedness of it. And it's all just captured in her leaning back in a convertible and letting the sun sort of wash over her. It's it's
one of
Okay, you've said now 52 times you haven't seen this yet, and so I will fess up and say, I announced to Richard after the second episode, this is unwatchable. I will never, ever watch one of these shows again, because I was really angry about those first 2 episodes. I just really was bored, and I found them tedious, and I was tired of being titillated by imagery and that just sat there as far as I was concerned. So what you people have done this evening is to make me want to go home and watch the rest. And I resent that. I really do.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
Because I'm not kidding. I now have to watch
It's
it.
a lot of time to commit. Yes,
Yeah.
sorry about that.
And the things that were pissing you off, they're still going to be there.
No, I'm sure.
These are hour-long episodes.
That's why I said I resent this, but you have indeed convinced me. I will do a cultist thing. Bob, I guess it's Bob, wears a snakeskin shirt. That snakeskin shirt is an echo for the snakeskin jacket that is worn in Wild at Heart.
That symbol of his individual personality and liberty?
Yes. And that, of course, is Marlon Brando's jacket in Orpheus Descending. What is wrong with you?
Because we want to tell you certain things that are coming
Yeah.
Oh,
But
no.
that were triggered by what you just said.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
Carry on. He knows
That's
him.
all. I was just going to share my cultist
Okay.
delight
Yeah.
in that.
Well,
Oh, so there's
hold
more.
on for part
Yeah.
5.
Yeah.
I don't think it should be described.
No, that should just be on its own.
Yeah.
I'll just inject my celebratory morbid note that one of the parts of the experience of this series is that it's an ongoing ghost story, because there are a number of people in it who are now dead. I don't know how long ago he started shooting this.
About a year, I guess, maybe 2000.
I think it must have been even longer,
Yeah.
because now we know the guy who played Bob died some years ago. I think 2010 or so, maybe even earlier than that. Who was, what was he just, he was a gopher or a gaffer?
Yeah.
They said, we need somebody to run into this scene and grin.
No, he was caught by mistake. He was like crouching behind a set, getting ready to do something, and they caught him in the mirror. And basically, the cinematographer said, "Oh, we have to redo that." Harry Silva got in the shot, or Silva, I can't remember. Got in the shot.
Frank Silva.
Frank Silva got in the shot, and Lynch is like, "No, I like it," and that led to the whole thing. But yeah,
So he is immortal, although he is also dead.
yes,
But other actors more recently have passed on, and I don't know how long we're going to continue to see them in the show. But
and I mean, I don't know if you've noticed this, but I think every episode, maybe not, but as far as I can think, every episode actually has been dedicated to an actor in the show who is dead, including Silva because of the gap, but also Farrar and Catherine Coulson. Yeah, they've all at the end they've all gotten a dedication. This episode is dedicated to so and so.
And on the flip side of that, going back to the tenderness of Lynch, one of the things that he is very tender toward is pop culture. As savage as some of the depictions of pop culture or the mutations of pop culture may be in his work, it has to be some kind of love that has him bringing back people. You say, "Oh my God, I haven't seen her in 20 years," and you. Who's this? Who's talking to Robert Forster in this thing? Is it? My God, it's her. And it's getting so now there are about 4 or 5 of them in a given hour. People brought back from the effectively dead, and that's just part of the strangeness and again tenderness of the whole enterprise.
He probably just goes home and goes to bed and dreams the next episode. No, I'm not kidding. I think he's dreaming all the time. Maybe he doesn't
sure.
even, maybe he's not even awake when he's awake.
I do think, though, it's like in discussions of this, I mean, it's Lynch's stamp. It deserves to be. It's under his quote. I do think that part of the uniqueness of Twin Peaks in Lynch's oeuvre, and I mean, excluding Fire Walk with Me. Fire Walk with Me belongs more with other Lynch films than with Twin Peaks because there is that strain of Mark Frost. You can tell is going through this. Some of that humor, like you say, some of the humor is it's all Lynchian, but you get the sense that it was written on the paper, and then Lynch is like, "Oh, let's just film this super slow, and that'll make it funnier." It's a wonderful collaboration that the two have, and I just wanted to point out too, also in terms of Fire Walk with Me, which of course was like the controversial prequel that Lynch made that many interpreted as sort of a kiss-off to the series in some ways, because it started off with a television set being smashed, but aside from that, this new series is doing something that, again, as supposedly irrational and dreamlike and all the rest that Lynch can be, he can be very precise and focused about some things, that if you actually watch this new series, the opening credits are Twin Peaks the series. It's that block font, it's got the border, it's got the green. The closing credits are the credits from Fire Walk with Me. So this is actually, we're sandwiched in between these two Twin Peaks vessels, and here is the third now. So it's...
Well, that actually brings me to a question I was going to pose, which is that I'm watching it, and I was thinking that in some ways the 25-year gap seems significant to what this new series is about. and I haven't articulated it yet, but there's something about this new thing that seems like it is about time, and it's about aging, and maybe about death as well. And I don't know what it is, but it does seem like it's a very late in the. It's a late work by an artist. It's an artist who's a septuagenarian now. But there's some, as one watches it, one tries to figure out what is this about, and what is the point of all this. And there's something about the way the actors have aged, and I don't know. Even the fact that so many of Lynch's reference points seem to still be rooted in the 50s and 60s, including some of the songs that we hear, and these bars that don't seem to have changed since 1958 or something like that, where the people kind of look the same, and some of the lingo is, and then there's Russ Tamblyn and Richard Beamer from West Side Story again, and these other references. I don't know. Maybe it'll become clearer that time is a leading character in this as we watch it, but this was going through my mind as I'm looking at it.
Yeah, I think it's way too preliminary, but I agree with you. Although I actually did have this reaction, because you watch like 4 episodes and you see these Twin Peaks actors return, and you see that they've been unapologetic about their graying hair and their stooping bodies, and you're right. It's like, oh, it's age, everything like that. And then Peggy Lipton shows up, and you're like, oh no, she hasn't changed a day.
Yes.
But that's kind of about time too.
Well, yeah.
Because she may be immortal, and partly what I was badly trying to communicate about the box and falling off the box in the cosmos was that there is something kind of adolescent about it, kind of a trippy sci-fi effort, but at the same time there's something so much about that's what happens to you when you fall into the void. You just fall into the void and you disappear, and that's it. And the image was just so terrible.
And it's actually, again, going back to that weird sort of tenderness, I agree with you. That woman that we've been describing, she is terrifying in her gestures and everything, but you actually do realize in the course of the scene she's trying to help him.
Yes, yes.
She's actually a force for good, for whatever value of good applies in this, universe.
She's like some kind of fate.
Yeah.
I don't mean to dress the character up, but I mean with those sewn together eyes, that sense of not seeing but wanting to protect, and very mysterious figure, indeed. I'm again. Thanks a lot for engaging me, because I am now.
Okay, excellent. Well, should we go to a couple of more down-to-earth entities in the form of some DVD and Blu-ray releases that are, I don't know, are these films out already or on DVD, or is it imminent?
Nick Ray's They Live by Night, I think officially maybe streets on Tuesday.
It's about the time this
The Ballad of Cable Hogue, I'm pretty sure is in the world. I have received my copy of the Ballad of Cable Hogue. I was loaned a clandestine pre-release They Live by Night. But yeah, I think one of them's out already, and the other one is, in any event, by next week it'll be happening. And by the time somebody sees this show, they'll definitely
they'll be available. Well, The Ballad of the Cable Hogue is a film that has never even really gotten maybe a cult reputation, I suppose. It's not a well-known film. Would you describe it, Richard, just so people know what it is?
I will begin my description by saying that it is my and Sam Peckinpah's favorite Sam Peckinpah film. That may be a bit perverse on his part, given that it is not known, and it didn't even manage to be controversial because people didn't pay that much attention to it. I think to the extent that they were aware of it, it was, oh, he made another movie, because it came in the wake of The Wild Bunch, and it did, although it playfully deals with some of the the violence and stylization that you encounter in the Wild Bunch. It's got a spirit very different from that and all its own. I will also say that there are few films in history that inspire in me such joy in not only watching them, but just going through life and suddenly remembering a moment in there, or a piece of music. It's also one of my favorite musicals, even though to describe it as a musical would seem very strange.
Yeah.
It's a comparatively gentle film, although people get killed in it, starting with the blowing apart of a Gila monster in close-up. But there is such sweetness and tenderness and great humorous gusto about the entire movie. It's a film. One of the things, it's a film in which you feel Peckinpah's exaltation in making movies. That just, hey, what if we cut it together this way? What if we took these, have two guys having a conversation, but as they trade lines, and you turn and look this way, and then you look this way, they meet each other coming and going, and they've changed clothes, and it's clearly 2 days later, but they're still continuing the same clothes. We can make this work. And by God, they make it work again and again. And he plays with slowing down the image and dubbing in dialogue that would not have been recorded at that moment, but it makes beautiful sense to dub it in here. And it's not a desperation move to impose coherence on a chaotic film. It's a wacky kind of poetry that he's playing with. It's just a bounteously wonderful film, and there's nothing more wonderful about it than the performance of Jason Robards, as I have described as a great gift of a performance. There's no other way to feel about it, because it is endlessly delightful. His every move, glance, half glance is
Wink.
is exquisitely timed as comedy and as character revelation. Peckinpah, he had been in The Artifact, not movie, but the Artifact that kind of rescued Peckinpah's career on a professional basis, because he was the star of the hour-long TV dramatization of Catherine Ann Porter's The Noon Wine, and that was, I think, in 1966 that they shot that. Well, Cable Hogue, it's actually being made in 1969. It came out in 1970. He was making the Ballad of Cable Hogue before the world knew about the Wild Bunch, including the people in the movie. Max Evans, who plays a small part in the film, Western writer, wrote a book about the making of the Battle of Cable Hogue, and I think it's called Sam Peckinpah, Master of Violence, for curiously commercial reasons, which Sam denounced passionately. But he talks about, they're about 2/3 of the way through shooting the movie, and one night it says, "Oh, we're all going to go to the movie theater in town, this little town." Forget whether it was Nevada or California, wherever they shot it, and we're going to see the first cut together of the Wild Bunch, and it's like they all emerge from that in shock, watching it and begin to question what kind of a madman they're working for, and Cable Hogue just seems to have been made in complete calm, serenity of spirit, good-naturedness. Actually, as described by Evans in his book, it was a very difficult shoot. They were out there in the desert. The cameras kept filling up with sand, and there are all kinds of reasons why they were frustrated on location, but it doesn't feel that way when you're watching it. The Cable Hogue is a desert rat who is left to die in the desert by two of his buddies, because there's water enough for 2, but not for 3 in their canteens. And he manages not to die, partly through a running conversation he has, an increasingly angry conversation with the Lord. And he somehow finds water where it wasn't. And on the basis of that, not only manages to survive, but is on his way to achieving a kind of triumph in capitalist America, because he and his water hole are on a 40-mile road where they represent the only respite from
Between Lizard and Dead Dog.
Yeah, Lizard may or may not be the same place as Gila. They keep speaking of it interchangeably, but yeah, and Kathleen was commenting as we watched it again today. The Blu-ray is very nice, by the way. It was shot by Lucian Ballard, who also was the cinematographer on the Wild Bunch. It is such a tightly conceived film in terms of the themes, in terms of the images that inform the dialogue, casual dialogue. There's a scene where Cable, just having found the spring where nobody suspected there would be such a thing, is talking to the couple of stage drivers, Slim Pickens and Max Evans, and while they discuss water and share a bottle of whiskey, and Max Evans steps around the coach to count his money or water his mule, namely...
Well, 2 religious types inside the stagecoach. The wife said, what does he mean? Count his money, water his mule. Sam's usual play with religious types.
Mm-hmm. What he means is he's taking a piss. Right. And you've got this... You've got the whiskey and the water and the urine and the gold that is flowing, the liquid gold that is flowing through the narrative. I would also add that Sam said at some point, I know that if not my favorite director, as somebody he really looked up to, was John Huston. And he and Huston both had a very special feeling about Mexico and what you would go there looking for and what you might hope to find. There's a way in which the Battle of Cable Hogue is not a remake of, but some kind of digestion of, and then rebirth of the Treasure of the Sierra Madre.
I really disagree with you on that.
What?
I don't. It doesn't have the kind of bitter.
No, it's not all the same film in terms of
You're saying
the
a
spirit.
redigestion
I'm talking.
of the arc.
About imagery, starting with the Gila monster. The rock that seems to be under which treasure is. People were invited to infer that that's where the treasure is buried. The way that gold flows through the movie as a color principle. I mean, it's a poet writing his own poetry, taking images from a previous poet, but not at all the same movie. No, much more that way would be Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia.
It just seems so Fordian to me, much more Fordian in its poetry. It is a musical, and as I once said, it's a musical about capitalism. And one of the things that fascinates me is that it's about the American dream as much as building Presbyterian churches in McCabe and Mrs. Miller. The ingredients of being an entrepreneur in the middle of nowhere. Only in this particular case, it's named Eden. I mean, they talk about it as being a little Eden in the middle of the desert. And there is such a sense of how you build something. You go and get the bank and the stage line involved when you go into town, and you have to see these people. You have to see it always as in Peckinpah as a metaphor for making movies, whether you're making water or making movies. And the sense of the banker being a benign soul who is ready to jump in and back this crusty scalawag who looks like nobody but wants to be somebody, the old American dream. A producer who is not like the producers in Bring Me the Head of Alfredo Garcia, who send people out to get someone's head.
It really was an enchanted moment.
Absolutely.
Right on the eve of all hell breaking loose in terms of Peckinpah
There's
in Hollywood.
such joy in this movie in terms of the music, the songs, and the way time elides in it. As Richard's pointed out, there's a sense in which there really isn't any time in it. It's just timeless. And sometimes it doesn't even seem to be a movie. Sometimes it just seems to be some people, having a good time out in the middle of the desert. And indeed, Matthew Peckinpah's little boy is in the movie eating rattlesnake stew. It's a strange film to me because it's kind of meta cinema. I don't ever have the sense that I'm deep into a pure Western movie. It seems to float somewhere else.
Well, it's like, that.
One more thing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's very much a road movie, and I will want to make some comparisons between They Live by Night and this film, which may seem strange. It's very much a road movie, even though the central characters never leave the station, the studio, the place, the setting where this is all created.
Yeah,
because when you talk about the discursiveness of time and how it's about capitalism, I think one of the if this is a self-portrait, which I would agree with you that it is, it's a very clear-eyed one, because one of the sort of things that makes this film a delight the first time, and then more elegiac as you see it again and again, is how Cable discovers this water. He knows what he's got to do, and there's until he meets this banker and signs on, it's just he never quite gets there. I don't mean frustratingly. I just mean he's oh yeah, I got this land, and then David Warner's oh, you actually own it? Well, no.
You haven't put a claim on it. But that's part of the journey.
That's what I'm saying. That kind of discursiveness is also, in other words, if this is a portrait of what it takes to get a movie made, Peckinpah was not immune to self-criticism.
Oh no!
In terms of this kind
but
of.
It's also,
even when he gets to town, he doesn't go to the banker right away. He sort of wanders
and he gets gets put off. And he doesn't have the know-how to handle things. He doesn't know what collateral is.
Right.
I'm worth something. See that it always comes back to I, which is the American way, the rugged individual and so on. And remember, Hildy says it's me and money. And everybody's pretty clear about that. And you'll see lots of parallels between McCabe and Mrs. Miller and Cable, Hogue. But there's such a sense of the American paradox, of the joy of creating place and business and a going business, getting ahead, building something, and that which underlies it, which is doom. Because as the minister says at the beginning, machines are the work of the devil, and it's a machine the color of money that runs Cable down. And when I talk about the illusion of time, Cable gets sort of knocked down by this great green convertible because machines are replacing stagecoaches and so on, and there'll be a new business maybe a gas station there instead of water. As
It doesn't have to be water anymore because of the cars. Yeah.
exactly, gasoline. And he just sort of announces, I'm dying. And it's like, oh. And it's the same thing, I mean, it's the same as saying, okay, this is the end of the movie. And with the end of the movie, Cable Hogue dies, or with Cable Hogue's death, it's the end of the movie. Because you don't just announce that you're dying and then have your bed put outside in the desert, which he loved, and have David Warner do your eulogy, which is so beautiful, so right. He wasn't a good man, wasn't a bad man. He was a man, and it is Sam's. Excuse me, Sam's epitaph, and the eulogy itself is delivered while Cable is alive, and Cable makes comments on it and says,
Yes.
"Right is right," or "That's not right," and then the camera cuts to David Warner, and suddenly they're standing around his grave. And time has just dissolved. And then everybody, the whole cast, just go their own ways, and we're left with that ramshackle place that Cable created, and a coyote, which of course must be Sam's spirit.
A collared coyote.
A colored?
Collared.
Collared?
Yeah.
How do you mean that?
It has a collar.
Oh,
It's not a
don't
wild.
think I've
it's
ever,
not a-
I've never seen that.
It's not a
Oh,
wild.
now I'll have to go and look.
Yeah.
Something, one of the things that was mentioned became Mrs. Miller, which came out the following year. There are ways in which this film is very much of its moment, and Sam knew it. When Cable finally is really, it has a solid base, is recognized by the community as a businessman, the stage line signs the contract with him. Okay, we can't find any water around here. We'll have to go with you and your water hole. And Slim Pickens, as the stage driver, said, forget the most important thing we got, and hands Cable a little package, which is a folded up American flag. Mm-hmm. And I think it's an American flag with 50 stars on it. You don't get to examine it that closely, but I think that's part of what's going on. And as Cable is very moved to receive the flag, and the preacher also who walks off to be alone in the desert for a while, but then comes back as the flag is being raised. And at that moment, when the country was being torn apart by the whole Vietnam thing and the demonstrations in the streets and angry hippies, and that this movie just stopped and said, there's something beautiful here, and it's that flag. And yeah, that's like the certification, oh yeah, you are now an official American capitalist. Mm-hmm. But it's a splendid moment. And connected to that, at the end of the movie, toward the end of the movie, when the preacher re-enters the film after having been gone for a while, he does so not on horseback, as he has been before, mm-hmm. but he comes in on a motorcycle. And he says, what do you call that ugly thing? And David Warner says, just a means of transportation. Mm-hmm. And of course, it was a year, this was being made in the immediate wake of Easy Rider, which had changed the face of American filmmaking and mm-hmm. also the values in American filmmaking. And it was just a mm-hmm. form of transportation. Mm-hmm. We're not really having any of that yet. Mm. That doesn't go in this movie.
Well, do we want to take it down the road to the? You said you were going to connect this to our other film, which is
odd, probably
fantastic film noir, but also other kinds of movie, I would say maybe too, by Nicholas Ray, They Live by Night. 1949, is that the right?
It's strange.
Yeah, it's not.
Yeah.
It was shelved for a couple of years.
Made in 47, often dated as 1948, but in some places released in 49.
Yeah,
It's I mean, except for like this strange little film you may have heard of called Citizen Kane, it is by far the greatest debut feature that John Houseman had anything to do with. As the first film directed by Nick Ray, and it's a wonderful film. I've actually never, I get why, I'm not saying that people are wrong, I've never quite considered it a noir, just because the tenderness of the romance. It's basically the young couple. It's Depression era. These people escape from prison, two old timers and the young guy. As they go to their first hideout, the young guy meets the young girl. They of course fall in love. Marriage and all the rest of it ensues. And even though it does have a lot of noir trappings, the central pulse is just these two. So there are two bank robberies in this film, and Nicholas Ray, even though he was his first feature, he could stage things as well as anybody. But they are both deliberately avoided as much as Bresson would. You don't see either heist go down. You see what he sees in the street in one case, and it's just edited out in the other.
You see through a car window, as Farley Granger as Bowie watches from the car while the jewelry man tries to speak to him at the window.
Yeah.
Because this movie is about cars, for sure, the way you describe it is accurate, and yet it has nothing to do with that movie in terms of its voluptuousness. It's the way it looks, the color, and the texture is what I mean. Mm-hmm. The texture, the design, the light. Yeah. Often Kathy O'Donnell as Kichi, the little girl. I mean, these are two very young
kids.
Creatures, and they are practically feral creatures who are introduced as not having been properly introduced to the world. Both of them from families that are less than animalistic. They have not been raised, but rather abandoned to their own devices. But the light in their faces, they're like some special breed of innocent abroad on these not mean streets but mean roads of Depression-era America. And everyone in this world that they are running in, everyone is venal, everyone is out to get ahead, to get money, to survive. And these two don't have a chance. Even when he does get money, it's amazing the way he just leaves it in places. He'll put money down for something and can't get it, and he just leaves it. The point I'm trying to make is that he doesn't have any lust for it. He sees it only as a means of transportation, buying a car, trying to get to Mexico, his Eden again, Mexico. Mm-hmm. Sam would have liked this. Two kids trying to run away from a very dark world into a sunlit world.
Well, I mean, yeah, but the sunlight part because of the Mexico dialogue, but actually they're linking. I'd like to think that, I've never heard him mention he ever saw it, but I would like to think that one of Buñuel's favorite scenes in the history of motion pictures is how, after we've been introduced to the characters, the way that there's this scene where Kichi, the young girl, is like brushing her hair, and then we go to Bowie lying on the bed, and they're about to sort of meet and hook up for the first time. But the bridge between them is this marvelous windswept shot of suddenly like clouds and just storms blowing through the trees, which has no purpose whatsoever except that this is the tempestuous passion already
And he's
even-
paranoid about it,
Yeah,
too.
yeah.
And she says, no, it's just the wind in the telephone
Yeah,
wires.
and wind in the telephone wires, exactly. And it's the wind in the telephone wires, but that's also where we've been watching this movie now for, I don't know, 15 or 20 minutes, and except for the opening credits, there's been no music. That's also where the score starts kicking, this lush, romantic score for these two. That's why I say, it's like, I get why it's considered a noir. I just myself have never...
It's kind of Shakespearean
Yeah,
noir.
yeah.
It's kind of Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah, it's very rough. In fact, when Altman redid the
Thieves.
novel that's been
Thieves
it's based
Like
on
Us.
called Thieves Like Us, Robert Altman did a version of it, and he did some wonderful things. But one that I've, as a huge Altman fan, I've never been able to quite wrap my head around, is that he actually has a radio play of Romeo and Juliet that he just keeps repeating over and over whenever these two get together. And thus thus with the arrival of the sun, did Romeo and Juliet consummate.
I like
their-
My Little Red Wagon better.
Yeah. And actually, I was going to mention, when you talk about how like everybody's out for money, there's a scene where they're at the nightclub and, the singer comes by and, it's an excuse to have a black person in a movie in 1946. But Ray doesn't diminish her any means. She does a beautiful job singing the song. But all of these movies that have had a person come in, sing a song, go through the crowd, this is the only one I can think of where it is said so explicitly that the reason she's going from table to table is to pick up the tip. She's
Well,
just taking the money that's
yeah.
proffered to her and holding it out.
This movie is every bit as poetic and often very tender as some of the descriptions have made it seem, and it's also what's funny because it is like Cable Hogue. It's about capitalism and the corrupting effect. I taught this film once, and to watch it a couple times in the week, and took a bunch of notes, and I realized, I think every single scene refers to money. Every single dialogue exchange.
And Cable, too.
What people will do for it, how they might betray someone for it, and actually justify it and say, I have no money. I had to turn you in because we've got nothing. I've got a family. It's the depression and so on. And the lust for it and the need for it. And it is rigorously made in that way.
And you see it frequently.
And you see it.
Piles of it. And
it's a remarkably, it's completely woven into the texture of the movie in an astonishingly detailed way.
unlike the $5 bill in Cable Hogue, which Cable is holding while he's looking at Hildy going up to her room. Hildy is a whore, unmitigated, unapologetic. And he looks down, he's lusting after her, and he looks down at his $5 bill, and the Indian on it smiles
Yeah.
Yes,
in
that's right.
animation.
Yes.
Yes, this is what I'm seeing, the connection. Both of these films are about American dreams. In the noir, in the Depression era, A Nightmare, there's all kinds of capitalism going on. I love the fellow who is the sort of motel owner where they set up housekeeping.
Oh, with his kids.
With
Byron Fowler.
pardon?
The actor's name is Byron Fowler.
Thank you. He's training his son
Yeah.
in the hospitality business, and he is just about hysterical in his attempts to be welcoming and good at what he does, so that he can get ahead and his kid can get ahead. And I thought about that place and that man and his kid, looking at Cable in his station, nailing down his plates so that he's feeding the stagecoach passengers from, and so on, and so that he can just throw water on them to clean them and so on. And then later grooming his arch enemy, Strother Martin, to take over the place and so on. In the one hand, you have, this hot desert sun breeding a kind of wonderful American dream without ignoring that there's always a price to be paid for progress. And on the other hand, you have this voluptuous, dark and luminous world of Depression-era America where nobody ever gets ahead no matter how many cars they buy. And the film starts with a high shot of this Model T careening through a country road. It's wonderful. It's not the very beginning of the film, I shouldn't say that, but it is.
It's the beginning of the film proper.
Proper,
There's
yes.
that weird little
That's weird.
freestanding prelude of just outside the movie making a comment on the characters.
Right. But there's such a sense of being in those cars, having to buy another one all the time and trying to get somewhere. And usually you wreck or you get shot or there's no, you can't get anywhere. You can't get ahead.
That's even. That's, I mean, that is actually the title comes when they're like they have to buy some getaway. They have to buy some cars to get away from the bank robbery they're planning. And the guy's like, "How much does a car cost?" It's like I can't remember the figures, but it's something like $1,500. It's like that's outrageous. He's like, everybody's thieves like us.
Yeah, but that's said over and over. Everybody is a thief like us.
Oh yeah, but I'm just saying that, like, you know, it even starts with the cars, because even Ian Wolfe, who does possibly my favorite performance in the film is Ian Wolfe, and he sells them a car for I think like $2,000 plus $500.
The guy who marries them.
Yeah, the guy. Yeah, they run off to get married, and he can also arrange a car if you got to get going. And I think people should be able to. He even has that line about people should get what they want if they can afford it.
If they can pay for it, yeah.
And
If they
then,
can pay for it.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then when Bowie wants to go to Mexico, which has been promised to him by this minister, I can get you to Mexico. I have lots of friends there. And it's one of the only gestures of humanity, humaneness, when the guy says, who's a totally venal creature, says, "No, I can't take your money. There's no chance.
I really want to pick up that money,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I
And
won't sell you hope when you have no hope."
Yeah. And then it just lies there, and everybody walks away from
Yeah,
it.
it's still there.
You speak of the high shot at the beginning of the movie. It's actually a helicopter shot, and it's something
Should've
that
said aerial.
recurs. Now you should say helicopter because I want to make a point. And it was what they were able to get a hold of to actually shoot the scene in the movie. The studio didn't want to pay for it or anything, but Houseman and Ray made it happen. And two things to say about it. First, that turns out there's to be a motif. Almost every time they hit the road again, it will be viewed from a helicopter, and there's this sense of just kind of getting up there and hooking onto the road again and being carried along. And the helicopter covering it is part of that sense of the vehicular energy. And it's a very dynamic motif in the course of the movie, and again, it's appropriate to this directorial debut, but it's also, every time it happens, there's more and more of a sense of the mechanical of the closing in, of the trap closing. That this appears to be you're hooking onto energy to get away, but in fact you're just getting closer to the end of the journey. Another thing is when the three convicts come after they got out of that car, and they're running overland to the rendezvous with T-Dub's brother. No, it's Chickama's brother.
Chickama's brother.
And they're coming down a hillside, and there's a billboard there. And this is being seen from the helicopter, and the helicopter's coming down for a closer shot of them. Helicopters being helicopters, it's flattening the grass and everything around there. And instead of this being like one of those situations where, oh, look, there's a vapor trail in the sky of this Western movie, giving away the fact that it's a movie and modern and everything, that's part of the dynamism of the shot, the energy. It's not a betrayal of artifice or anything. It's part of the whipping energy. Scorsese uses that at the beginning of Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. Same thing, and it validates. In fact, it gives more energy to that movie than it's got inherently. But in the case of this film, it's an authentic dynamism. I noticed something. I don't think I've ever picked it up on a previous viewing. When you get to that scene where Bowie and Keechie, who've been traveling, escaping on a bus, and they pulled in for a brief stop in this town Fairfield, where there is a wedding chapel, a grotesque wedding chapel run by Ian Wolfe. And there's this big flashing sign, weddings, day or night, anytime, whatever you need. And they decide they're going to get married, just a decision on the spur of the moment. And they start walking, and in fact, they're shot through that sign from behind. And it's like, Gary's sign and all. And you cut to an angle above them, not in a helicopter, but just on a crane a little bit, as they make their way up the path to the door. And it's suddenly almost beautiful and tender. It's like they're walking into a garden.
Yeah.
And they get up to the door, and there's something auspicious that has been wrested from that moment. And then later in the movie, when Kichi, when Bowie comes back to that place, because that guy can get us a car, that guy can get us to Mexico. Yeah, he said he could do that. And when he comes out after the, I won't take your money, I can't sell you hope when there is no hope. He is seen, again from the camera, inside his car, and he's just a very small figure surrounded by not only night, but what seems like a horrible thicket. Yeah. Those garden plants that had been auspicious in the previous shot, it's now like almost a horror scene. Like and what extraordinary sensitivity Ray had, not only with his acute sympathy for his two characters, but for the medium that he was working in the first time.
Even the very last shot, I won't give it away because it should be a surprise, but and a delight. But you were mentioning how these are the figures of light in the middle of this darkness, and the final shot is without going full stop down. It doesn't go black, but it is a fading of light from a face that swallows you. Yeah, it's interesting.
I think we have come to the end of our time. I think we should probably pull the plug and let people go home now. Sorry to jump in like that.
Get on the road, as it were.
Yes.
Get back on the road and see what we can do. So thank you, and thank you.
Thank you.